Conversationalists, welcome. It is Erickson here. The phone number 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, if you text the word data, D-A-T-A, to 33777, you'll be able to get the show notes and get a discount on the show notes. I highly recommend it. I would like to talk to you about the Qatar deal and provide you perhaps a more nuanced picture than the outrage. And again, just side note, stepping back here. Y'all know I criticize Donald Trump, and I get a lot of hate from Trump supporters oftentimes. I got Trump derangement syndrome, you name it. And you know, there are things he does that I like. There are things he does that I don't like. I'm willing to tell you what I think about it. There are a lot of people who just can't handle criticism of their side of the aisle. And you must be the enemy if you criticize. And I criticize everybody, and I criticize from inside the house because there are things he does that I think are going to hurt him and the GOP and elevate the Democrats, and I'd like them to go in a different direction. But oftentimes there are people who are so poisoned by Donald Trump, so broken by Donald Trump, they can't actually see what's actually going on. And so many of those people are in charge of the media, and they cannot look at a situation honestly. They have to look at it through a poisoned, broken frame. And the Qatar deal is one of those situations where Qatar wishes to gift a 747-800 to the United States Defense Department that would then allegedly be transferred to Donald Trump's presidential library after he leaves office. Let's just lay this on the table. If you are a Trump supporter and support this, you will argue that Donald Trump is clear-eyed and is not going to be persuaded to cut sweetheart deals with Qatar for a 747, that the bribes don't work with Donald Trump. He can't be bought. If you hate Donald Trump, you will say, this is a bribe. They know they can play Donald Trump. They can have their way with him. This is corrupt. He's corrupt. It's all corrupt, and this is bad. Neither side actually gets to the heart of the matter, and that is from Donald Trump himself from his first term in office.
Unfortunately, has historically been a funder of terrorism at a very high level. And in the wake of that conference, nations came together and spoke to me about confronting Qatar over its behavior. So we had a decision to make. Do we take the easy road, or do we finally take a hard but necessary action? We have to stop the funding of terrorism. I decided, along with Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, our great generals and military people, the time had come to call on Qatar to end its funding. They have to end that funding and its extremist ideology in funding.
Qatar has never stopped funding terrorists. And this is the thing you've got to understand. Qatar funds terrorism. Qatar is Hamas's second favorite country. Hamas leaders have taken safe haven in Qatar. Qatar has actively funded the murder of American citizens. I need to tell you this again. This is my problem with taking the plane from Qatar. It's not that it's a bribe. It's not that it's corrupt. We'll get to Boeing here, but my objection to taking this 747-800 from Qatar is not that it's an attempt to bribe the president. It's not that it's corrupt. It's not that it's a violation of the Emoluments Clause. My problem with taking this plane from Qatar is I do not think the president of the United States of America should sit and fly on a plane purchased with the same money used to murder American citizens. And that's what Qatar does. Qatar is a rogue regime that is not our friend. And many people in Washington, D.C. treat Qatar the way they treated China 20 years ago, as if it's some innocent country that's just involved in things. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, was a lobbyist for Qatar. She made $119,000 a month. I don't think that we should agree with Pam Bondi saying, oh, yes, Qatar can gift this to the Department of Defense on condition it goes to the Trump Presidential Library. I think she's opening Donald Trump up to legal trouble later. Qatar spends a lot of money to improve its image while paying terrorists to murder American citizens. And I do not think the president's Air Force One substitute should be a plane bought with the same money used to kill American citizens. Qatar is not a good country. Qatar is not our friend. Qatar is two-faced. And Qatar continues to fund the terrorists who kill Americans around the world, as well as funding propaganda outlets like Al Jazeera. Qatar gives safe haven to Hamas terrorists. And Qatar has ruffled the feathers of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates for playing nice with Iran. We shouldn't be taking this plane from them. If it was another country, we could have different arguments. But it's Qatar that's the problem. But the real problem, and this is gotten overshadowed by the press corps' outrage over this is corruption or this is, you name it, this is bribery. The real problem here is Boeing. The reason Donald Trump wants to take this plane from Qatar is because Boeing can't get the new Air Force One off the ground, and this has gotten distracted. The ABC News story this weekend, making it as salacious as it is. You know, in fairness, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal have both covered this same story in the last 2 weeks, and it was not nearly as blown out of proportion as what ABC News tried to claim it as with a bribery scandal. The reality is that the president wants the Qatari plane because Boeing can't seem to function. Let me give you the timeline. In 1985, Ronald Reagan signed off on what is the present Air Force One. Ronald Reagan signed off on those two 747 jets. Nancy Reagan helped design the interior. The timeline, pay attention to the timeline. The plane was commissioned by the president in 1985. The plane was built in 1986. The plane had its first test flight in 1987. In 1988 and 1989, it was retrofitted by the military to fit the needs of the commander-in-chief. And in 1990, it was delivered to George H.W. Bush. George H.W. Bush, in 1990, just in time for the Iraq War, was the first president to use the present Air Force One. It is a 39-year-old plane in need of fixing. It is in need of updating. And in 2018, Donald Trump commissioned Boeing to begin building a new 747-800 as Air Force One. In 2018, Donald Trump began the process. And now Boeing says it's not going to be able to do it until 2029. It's not going to take off until 2029. And you know, one of the things Boeing is saying, oh, the contractor burdens are so high. If the contractor burdens are so high, why are we giving it the F-47 contract? The new technically advanced plane. Why are we giving it the new plane? Boeing's space program has been a disaster. Boeing has lived sclerotically on government funding. Boeing pays lobbyists to keep Boeing in the game, and Boeing can't keep aircraft in the air. The whole reason the president wants this plane is because a major American corporation is unable to function without government subsidy these days. Boeing is what happens when you get addicted to Uncle Sam's teat. You all know I assume Comfortably Smug on Twitter, on the Ruthless podcast. I pointed out the problem here is Boeing, and he replied to my tweet, Boeing is shockingly dysfunctional. And a prime example of what happens when you combine regulatory capture, an army of lobbyists, and infinite taxpayer money as a prize with zero oversight. That's exactly it. Boeing bought McDonnell Douglas and put the bean counters of McDonnell Douglas in charge. Contrary to the DEI screams, the bean counters are part of the problem. And Boeing has miscalculated ever since. They decided to go with the 737 MAX and 737-800, which they're having problems with. They scuttled the 757 program, which actually made it money. They keep making bad decisions. And now they can't get a 747-800 off the ground for the President of the United States, and they're blaming the government for it. The president has gotten frustrated with it. Joe Biden thought about canceling the plane. Donald Trump has thought about canceling the plane. Instead, Donald Trump came up with a stopgap measure. And by the way, I don't know that anyone has reported this. Do you know the Qatari 747-800? It was going to be sold anyway. The Qatari family was divesting it. It was parked in West Palm Beach a while back in February. Donald Trump walked through it, got to see it. It's like a luxury palace in the sky. They had put it on the market. Now, how do I know this? Because, one day I'd like to fly private. I look at all the private aviation sites and what's for sale and whatnot, and there's been this 747-800 for sale for a while. It's the Qatari plane. Now, they're going to give it, allegedly, to the Defense Department. They're not going to sell it. But I'm sorry. I don't think we should take a plane from Qatar. If it was a plane from any other country, I'd say, you know what? I mean, we're clear-eyed here. There are federal watchdogs. There's the media. If Donald Trump started cutting sweetheart deals after getting the plane, there would be a red flag. It's not about the potential to bribe or corrupt Donald Trump. It's about Qatar is a funder of terrorists around the world who murder American citizens. And I don't think the President of the United States of America should fly in an Air Force One that was gifted from a country that pays to murder Americans. As a side note, I don't think it's a good look for the president to tell Americans you need to restrict the number of dolls you're buying. Maybe you can't have 30, you'll have 2. And then say, but I really need a brand new 747-800 from Qatar as a gift. There's a disconnect in the messaging that you need to sacrifice and give up, but he doesn't need to sacrifice when it comes to the plane. I just think that is a bad look. And I think when Americans were to see the president on this plane, yeah, the people who hate Trump, they'll say, oh, he was bribed. It was bribery. It was sweetheart deal. There's so much media oversight. It's going to be real hard for Donald Trump to start doing things to favor Qatar because of a plane without people knowing about it. I actually think that's an overstated problem. I think the problem is Americans will see the President of the United States climb the steps of this plane and take off into the skies on a plane bought with the blood money of a nation that murders Americans. That's the problem with Qatar's 747. But the real problem is that the United States government got Boeing addicted to Uncle Sam's man boob, and Boeing doesn't know how to function without government subsidy and now is passing the buck to the government, and we need to reform Boeing. Someone needs to reform Boeing so we're not in this problem.